Taisho Otome Fairy Tale was a series that during our preview of the fall 2021 anime season, I was sold on. I knew this was going to be the gem of the season, and I'm really happy to say that after finishing the 12-episode series, this is hands down one of my favorite shows of 2021. Focusing heavily on this concept of somebody being discarded by society, and this warmth that two people can bring to each other that ultimately bring them up and establish new connections to the world. But this is my review of Taisho Otome Fairy Tale, so let's jump into it. Taisho Otome Fairy Tale takes place in the Taisho era in 1921, and it follows Tamahiko, who is a part of the Shima family. And the Shima family is a very renowned family. There seems to be a lot of kind of stigma around them, obviously being very rich and obviously controlling a lot of things with their money. And Tamahiko is unfortunately involved in a car accident with his mother, where she ends up dying. And this unfortunate incident gets worse as we find out that Tamahiko has lost control of his right hand. And his father, who sees him as being useless now because he no longer has control of his dominant hand, ends up exiling him into the mountains of Chiba. Now at the age of 17, kind of deemed as useless, now living the rest of his life just secluded up in the mountains, he kind of goes in this dark place of himself. His entire family sees him as useless, even saying that they wish that he had died, not his mother. But while he's in this darkness, a knock comes at the door. And as he opens this door, he finds a girl named Yuzuki, a 14-year-old that his father had sent to him to take care of him. As he recalls, in his last conversation with his father, he said that he might send him somebody to take care of him or be his wife. And that is Yuzuki. And knowing this, he welcomes Yuzuki in, gives her a place to stay, but ultimately gives her the decision that she can just leave if she wants to. He's going to stay there, he's going to die away, and he doesn't really care about his future. But despite this, Yuzuki takes care of him, feeds him, keeps him warm, cleans the home, and ultimately her kind nature slowly pulls him out of that darkness and makes him realize there's something important here. And as it goes along, you see this bond created between the two of them. As Tamahiko really does seem like he wants to give up on life, he has something here. Somebody that really doesn't want to let him go, and ultimately keeps pulling him out gradually from this darkness. But unfortunately, things of his past constantly kind of tugging at him. His father wanting to cut all ties with him, his sister showing up and mocking the relationship that he has with his new wife. But despite this dark nature constantly nagging at him, it seems like Yuzuki is the one that keeps pulling him back out and showing him that he has some self-worth. So my thoughts on Taisho Otome Fairy Tale, this was an absolute treat for me. And it was so funny because early on when I first started watching the series, I kept trying to push tropes within the series. Okay, we'll find out that Yuzuki was actually somebody that knew Tamahiko when he was younger, and she always dreamed of being his wife. All these kind of things kept jumping in there to make me think that, okay, what trope are they going to do this time? What trope are they going to do this time? And it never does. Thankfully, unlike so many other series of this type, it doesn't have pre-established stuff. Even though it seemed like Yuzuki was so positive and so relentless, this was their first meeting. And as it kind of starts telling the story of these two characters, you really kind of get an idea of what this is all about. This insecurity that Yuzuki even had as she was sold off by her family for debts in order to take care of Tamahiko, but Tamahiko welcomed her in. When she had this fear and this unknown about her, she realized that this guy will take care of her and that she has a place that she can be and a husband that won't abuse her. This is unfortunately a thing of its time, being sold off to different families, and you never really know where you're going. But yet he welcomes her in, gives her that warmth that she needs, and in return, she gives him that dedication and that warmth that he needs. And so the two of them, realizing this, are constantly trying to warm each other up until you eventually realize that the two of these are perfect for each other. It's no pre-established love that you watch grow naturally. And I have to give the story a lot of credit for that. These are circumstances the two of them are placed in that they ultimately didn't decide at the very beginning, but will nurture at this point and grow together. And as it goes along, there's so many points of the story where the circumstances will often create a misdirection, where you realize that despite somebody being very rotten, you realize that there's a story behind it. And this is evident when we meet the first person in this whole story, which is the sister. And the sister comes in and acts like this place is just empty because obviously this guy's dead. But you'll quickly realize that similar to Tamahiko, she has her own baggage as well. And again, simply that kind nature of Yuzuki is able to kind of create some sort of resolution to it. Realizing at some point that sometimes when somebody's in their darkest place, all it takes is a kind heart and somebody to be attentive to you to make you realize that not everybody's like that. Not everybody's out to get you. And despite this tarnished name of the Shima, that often people will look at with glaring eyes, some people don't care and realize that you're not the sum of your name. And the way that it portrayed a lot of that, despite these moments where you're just kind of frustrated, how nasty some people can be, there's still hope there. And that hope is kind of encompassed by Yuzuki. You realize that she's kind of this shining beacon that makes people realize that sometimes it's not that important, that there's more important things in life, your goals, your future, and the life ahead of you, rather than what you were. And Taisho Otome Fairy Tale, similar to that, kind of tells this in so many great ways. And Yuzuki's not the only thing here that we're really working with. This has a really great cast of characters that, again, have their own baggage, but at the same time always kind of find some way of making a connection with each other. Well, now typically Yuzuki is the way to kind of encompass that, or at least trigger that. Everybody has their story and their own thing that they will end up bringing to the future of the story. Tamahiko's always kind of trapped himself in this dark nature that he is because he, again, was discarded in his life. But through Yuzuki, decides at some point that she is kind of his goal. Like, I need to create a future because Yuzuki's here with me. Yuzuki, again, is kind of this bright light of hope, despite her own insecurities that she's able to mask a little better than most people. But you see her determination and the love that she kind of brings into the mix. Again, getting into the sister and the name of the Shima family that constantly was bagging down on her, and that hope that she has for her future that possibly she won't be able to do because of who she is. Even getting into later characters like Ryo, who is just kind of this thief girl that eventually realizes there's something here as well. It's got a great cast that all add to this whole story as being told around the Shima family. And it's something that I cherished every single episode. Now, I will say, this was one of the rare cases of a show that, despite the fact that I was a little bit behind on watching it, and as I got caught up, I realized how much I love this show, and every episode was just filling me with warmth and just joy, and yes, at points, frustration and sadness. This was one that I'm so happy I binged at the later parts of it, because this show gets really heavy later on. So keep that in mind. We're obviously talking about the Taisho era. There was a certain event that happened in the Taisho era, and so it kind of gives a little bit of weight to a lot of things later on. And I don't know how anybody handled this show on a weekly basis as it was releasing, because there was a point in which I could not stop watching because I was so stricken with fear as to how this show was going to end. It was a great story, and I think the one thing that I love so much about it, as I've mentioned several times before in so many of my other content that I've created, I love snapshots of time periods. And again, this being the Taisho era, being in the early 1920s, this is a time period that is really interesting to me. And to see how well they handled this period of time was fantastic. The visual, the style, everything really well encompassed this time period, and I love seeing that insight. And ultimately, it is a fantastic romance, despite the fact that you do have technically a character that starts out at 17, one at 14. It's respectful about aspects such as the age of consent and all these kind of things. This is a really beautiful budding relationship that I just don't really see in many cases. I am literally the most critical person when it comes to anime romance. In so many cases, I feel that it's either over-dramatized, melodramatic, too much of misunderstandings and people not talking. Now, while there is points in the show where you're like, dude, just say it. It doesn't play off it too much. Again, this is a very naturally budding relationship that is kind of this result of circumstances that I absolutely treasured. There's so many beautiful points in this show. Yuzuki is just a beautiful person. I loved seeing these two together and everything they go through. It is just slice of life at its best, with some comedy here and there, but I don't think ever a focus. It's never to a punchline. This is just circumstances and things happen. But that's my thoughts on Taisho Otome Fairy Tale. I really should stop because I could go on and on about how fantastic this show is. It looks great. The characters are fantastic. The romance is beautiful. There's so many great points in the show that I don't want to spoil. It is an absolute gem of the fall 2021 anime season, and it's unfortunate that I didn't see enough people talking about it, because I think this is going to be one of those ones that unless you're watching this and I somehow push you to watch it, it's going to get lost in history, and it really shouldn't. This is a fantastic show, so definitely a recommendation from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, leave a like down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the series if you're going to check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already, share this if you can, support us on Patreon, or throw a tips link in the description below, and I definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.